In my review for this shoe, the Evo SL, I said that this is a do-it-all shoe, that literally it can do anything that you need to do as a runner, and I stand by that. While this shoe does have its sweet spot, it has its kind of area it wants to be in the most, it will do pretty much everything you need it to do. And as I was putting versus videos together for this shoe, which I do for all my primary reviews, I realized that this shoe literally compares to every other Adizero shoe. So I thought I'd sit down and I'd go through all of them and talk about how this shoe compares to them and in many cases betters them. Couple things before I jump in. This video isn't going to be my normal in-depth versus videos because I have 7 comparisons to go through. So I'm going to go through this pretty rapid fire, at least for me. Second thing is, take a look at this. You need to know these foams. These foams are going to come up in this video because I'll be talking about all 3 of these. There's Lightstrike Pro, the current formula of Lightstrike Pro. There's Lightstrike Pro Classic, which is what's in the Evo SL and most of the shoes I'll be talking about in this video. And then there's Lightstrike Pro Evo, which is what's in the Evo 1. And yes, I'll be talking about the Evo 1 at the end of this video. And if you stick around to the end, for those of you who like my performance matrices, well, I have the mother of all performance matrices at the end of this video. Stick around for that. First up is the Evo SL versus the Adios Pro 3. What surprises me here is that little ride diagram that I do, which I do when I initially review the shoe, or the shoe appears in the first versus video. For both these shoes, it's springy and they're actually very close. And the ride of these two shoes to me is extremely close. And that really kind of amazes me because again, these are done months apart often. The Evo SL and the Adios Pro 3 as far as weight, they're actually very close. And both of these shoes use full Lightstrike Pro Classic foam, so they're actually the same foam. There's a minor tweak to the Evo SL foam, but it's fundamentally the same foam. But the biggest difference between these two shoes is the rocker profile. The late stage rocker, the Adios Pro 3, didn't always work well for me as a forefoot striker, but the early stage rocker profile on the Evo SL really works for me. And looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, you see from a dimension standpoint, they're actually very similar. It's kind of like the Evo SL has inherited the best of the Adios Pro 3. Not only that big forefoot piece of continental rubber, but just the overall shape of this shoe. They're actually quite similar. And looking at these two shoes together, I think the biggest change that a lot of people are going to be thankful for is the awful upper that was on this shoe is replaced with an upper that's not perfect. It has its issues, but it is so much better. This shoe is now comfortable and it actually fits the foot well. As far as the ride of these two shoes, as I pointed out, they're both springy because they're both using Lightstrike Pro Classic foam. Now, if you ever ran in this shoe, and I bet a lot of you did watching this video, you probably always wondered what would this shoe feel like without the carbon fiber rods in it? Well, that's what this shoe is. And in fact, this shoe rides so smoothly, so nicely. It really inherits that sort of endless foam, very perfect ride of this midsole, but just makes it all that much smoother. The new geometry in this shoe just makes this shoe transition much better for really any foot strike, and it's just super smooth underfoot. If you loved this shoe and you raced in this shoe and you couldn't find a bunch more pairs of this, though there's some really great deals as of the recording of this video, and you're looking for a shoe for 2025 to race in, I think this is a really valid option to really replace this shoe. And in many ways, the Evo SL feels like an upgrade to this shoe or a true replacement. If you don't like the Adios Pro 4 and the new foams, this is basically your Adios Pro 3.5 you could look at. Even though there's no carbon fiber rods in this, I don't think you're paying any penalty for that. I actually think this shoe is as fast, if not faster, than the Adios Pro 3. And I think all across the board, the Evo SL is a massive upgrade to the Adios Pro 3, which was an excellent shoe. The Evo SL versus the Boston 12. Now, these are two very different generations of shoes, which I don't normally like to compare. I will do a more in-depth comparison between the Evo SL and the Boston 13 sometime later in 2025. But this comparison is probably the most requested one that I've seen in the comments of all my videos about the Evo SL. And the thing that stands out to me here, and this is just something that was immediate in my first run of the Evo SL, is that the Evo SL is the replacement for the Boston 12. The Boston 12 doesn't really need to exist anymore. And I know that's going to anger a lot of people who love the Boston 12, but the Evo SL is a better Boston. The ride profile is more springy, more dynamic, more fun, whereas the Boston 12, while that was a great shoe, was just very, very firm. It did what it did really well, but it was really focused just on tempo running, where the Evo SL does that tempo running better, and it does a whole lot more. Now, both these shoes are using Lightstrike Pro Classic. However, the Boston 12 does have that carrier foam in there, which dulls it down, but in the Evo SL, you just have pure Lightstrike Pro Classic, so there's no dulling down on the foam, and that really changes the ride of the shoe. The other thing I'm going to say about the Evo SL is that it is lighter, and you do notice that on foot. The balance of the Evo SL is much better than the Boston 12, which could feel very bottom heavy. Moving to the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, from a dimension standpoint, they're actually quite similar. And that big 4-foot piece of rubber, which I think all of us loved in the Boston 12, is again carried over to the Evo SL, though the tread pattern is now gone from that. So if you ran a lot in the Boston 12 on dirt and gravel roads, the Evo SL is going to be not quite as good, but it's going to do just fine because I found it quite grippy on that surface. But overall, I think what worked really well for the Boston 12 outsole is carried over basically into the Evo SL outsole, and I think it's going to work just as well in most instances. Comparing these two shoes, what I'm about to say, again, I think is going to anger a lot of fans of the Boston 12, but the Evo SL should have come out 2 years ago, and it should have been called the Boston 12. This is more of a Boston than this shoe ever was. This is a better Boston. And not only comparing these two shoes head to head, but just what the promise of a Boston is. A trainer that can do everything, including faster running and race. That's exactly what this shoe is. It will do anything and race. Yes, you could do that in this shoe, but it didn't do the easy stuff very well. And I think for a faster racer, this wasn't the best option. But this will do that easier running okay. It's not my first choice, but it will do it. Does the tempo running excellently, and I don't think you're taking any compromises in racing in this shoe, even for a very fast time in really any type of road racing. So I'm going to make a video probably in the next couple weeks that's going to go deeper into this topic because there's a lot more to say here, but if you love the Boston 12, you're probably going to love the Evo SL even more. Evo SL versus Takumi Sen 10. Now this wasn't a comparison that I really thought of until I started to put this video together. And what stands out to me is that both of these shoes use full Lightstrike Pro Classic foam, though the Takumi Sen 10 has 2 durometers of it, one under the foot and then one closer to the ground. But the ride is so much different between these two shoes. And it has nothing to do with the stack height, and it's really nothing to do with the energy rods. The Evo SL is springy, it's rolling, it's bouncy, whereas the Takumi Sen 10 is just very direct. From a durometer standpoint, any test that I've seen between these two shoes, they're really within the same realm, especially the firmer durometer foam that's on the bottom of the Takumi Sen 10. But the ride characteristic of these two shoes is just extremely different. The one thing they do share is they have a very rolling off the toe feel. That's because of the revised rocker geometry in the forefoot of the Evo SL on the Evo SL. And in the Takumi Sen 10, that's that heel to toe rocker that's really in that shoe that just makes that shoe really rolling forward. Moving to the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, obviously the Takumi Sen is considerably narrower. It is really a race flat, where the Evo SL is a trainer that you can race in. So I would expect some vast differences here, but I think this also highlights some of the complexity in some of Adidas's engineering of previous generations. And you can really see that in the Takumi Sen 10, whereas in the Evo SL, it is just super simple, super streamlined. I will say that the forefoot rubber in the Evo SL feels much more like the black patches of rubber that are on the Takumi Sen 10. It's not quite as thin if you've ever run in the Takumi Sen 10, but it has that same feel. And comparing these two shoes side by side, again, I didn't initially think there was really a comparison here, but if you watched some of my content about the Takumi Sen 10 last year, this was a shoe that I actually did like for some tempo running, some longer tempo running, like 1K repeats, even 5K repeats. But now that this shoe exists, this shoe completely eclipses this shoe. And I just find this such a much better, more comfortable, more dynamic, more fun, and frankly, more fast shoe than this shoe. All the data videos and all the data that I looked at for this shoe, it felt fast, but it never was fast for me, where this shoe feels fast and is fast. Again, it's early days in this shoe and I need to do a lot more testing. I'll do some data deep dives on this shoe compared to other shoes. But right now, this is a no-brainer. Evo SL over the Takumi Sen 10 in every single instance I can think of, including racing. If I was going to go race a 5 or 10K right now, which is the sweet spot of what this shoe is built for, I would do it in this shoe without a doubt. Evo SL versus the SL2. Now, this is probably the biggest comparison that everyone is asking for. And on the surface, I don't actually think these two shoes completely compare. I think they complement one another. I think they're designed to work together. Now, the Evo SL, as I've repeated many times in this video, is very springy, it's very fun, it's very dynamic. And I found the SL2 none of that. It just felt very neutral to me. It was a shoe that could pick up the pace. The Lightstrike Pro core in that shoe did the job, but it was just muted by the Lightstrike 2.0 foam all around it, and just took off the edge of the shoe. Now, it's meant to be a neutral trainer, so that makes total sense. And that's why I think these two shoes really complement one another and work together. The Evo SL, while you can do easy or daily running in it, I think it's just too dynamic. It's just kind of too much. It's too much of a handful, and you're always going to be fighting that shoe to stay slow, to go easy. Whereas the SL2 really just does that really well. You can pick up the pace in the SL2, but why would you when the Evo SL now exists? Moving to the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, dimension-wise, they're actually quite similar, which I wasn't really prepared for because the Evo SL just feels so much more nimble than the SL2. But a lot of that's geometry in the foam. And the outsole on the SL2, I think, is a better, grippier, more durable, all-around training outsole, which makes sense on that shoe. I like the stripped down sort of minimalist outsole on the Evo SL because that really focuses it on tempo running or performance road running and racing. Comparing these two shoes side by side, the one thing that really stands out to me is that this is a shoe, the Evo SL, that as I've had it, the 55 miles or so that I put in two pairs of these as I'm testing out different sizes, this is a shoe that I constantly want to reach for and just keep running in. In fact, I had to stop myself from reaching for this shoe because I have other shoes I need to be testing for this channel and other shoes I need to be running in for the training that I need to do. I can't do everything in this shoe and only this shoe, even though this is the only shoe that I want to run in right now. However, this is a shoe that I never had those feelings for. I never reached for this shoe. I never thought of running in this shoe. I never was excited to go run in this shoe. When I did take it out for a run, it worked really well. It did its job, and it had a little pop because of the Lightstrike Pro core, but it was just never a shoe I was excited to run in. However, as a daily trainer, that's kind of what you want. I think a daily trainer needs to be a bit of a boring shoe because it just needs to do the job. And this definitely did the job. So I think the Adizero range needs that basic, albeit boring daily trainer, and that's exactly what this shoe is. But that's again why I think this shoe and this shoe really complement one another. You do your daily running in this, you do your tempo running in this, and you can kind of balance them together. I think that just works out really well, even though this shoe is completely capable of doing everything this shoe does much better. Evo SL versus Adios Pro 4. Two of the 2025 shoes. And I think this is really the big comparison, and I think a lot of people will be comparing and contrasting these two shoes head to head. Now, the ride profile of both these shoes is springy versus bouncy. The new Lightstrike Pro foam is extremely soft. There's a lot of sink. There's a lot of bounce in that, and the ride of the Adios Pro 4 is drastically different than anything that's come before that with Lightstrike Pro Classic. It may not be for everyone, and for those who do not like the new feel of the foam and you want something else from Adizero, I think that's the Evo SL. And I actually think these are the two shoes that really go head to head right now because I think these are the two really valid race options from Adizero in 2025. Looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, The Adios Pro 4 is a little wider in the forefoot and midfoot, though the Evo SL in the midfoot definitely feels more substantial because you don't have that giant cutout. There is a slight indentation, but it's not really a cutout like in the Adios Pro 4. But the heel in the Evo SL is much more stable. So for pronators, I think the Evo SL is actually kind of a valid option. You need to try it out to see if it actually works for you, whereas the Adios Pro 4 is a shoe that a pronator should completely forget even exists because it will not work for you at all between the design and the softness of the foam. Putting these two shoes head to head, there are some substantial differences between these two shoes, and you can obviously see that. The fit of the Adios Pro 4 is much, much better. I cannot stress how much better this shoe fits than the Evo SL. This is very much a training fit. This is a race fit, but this is a fit that really is wrapping around your foot, where the fit on the Evo SL is just kind of okay. Does the job, doesn't cause any problems, but this shoe just fits perfectly. And the new upper textile in this is also near perfection as far as a race upper. However, the other big difference is really the geometry. Both of these shoes inherit the earlier rocker from the Evo 1. However, the Evo SL literally has the same geometry as the Evo 1, whereas the Adios Pro 4, they've modified it a bit. There's a little bit more toe spring in the shoe, and you do notice it on the ride. The other thing I'll say is if you run in the Evo SL and then you go run in the Adios Pro 4, you're going to realize how much softer this shoe is, and they actually ride so differently to the point where I don't really know if I can recommend the Evo SL as a tempo trainer to the Adios Pro 4. At least going back to back, like doing doubles on a single day, you're just going to feel so different between the two shoes. But I do think they can work together. I just think you need to spend a little bit more time on the Adios Pro 4 and the new foam than you do here. I think you use the Evo SL in connection with the Adios Pro 4 to give more durability to this, because the durability of this foam is unknown. Early reports are saying it's okay, but it's not as durable as Lightstrike Pro Classic. So this is something I'm actually going to be talking quite a lot about in 2025. I'll have some more content on this channel that goes deeper into the connection between these two shoes, how to use these two shoes together, and also how to pick which one is going to be better. But what I'll leave this section with is, if you miss the Adios Pro 3 but you wanted that new geometry, this shoe, I don't think there's any penalty for picking this shoe as a race shoe for any road racing distance. But if you like the new, you liked Zoom X foam from Nike and you always wanted that in an Adizero shoe, well, this is much closer to Zoom X now, and you're actually going to really love this shoe. So you can't go wrong with either one of these. It's really going to come down to what your preference is, and it's going to be something that I think a lot of Adizero runners are going to be agonizing over in 2025. The Evo SL versus the Adios 9, the battle of the Adizero shoes with no stiffening element, though both these shoes have a top-weighted midfoot shank, which is not a propulsive or stiffening element. It's really just there to control the twist of the shoe. Now, initially, I see the difference between these shoes as extremely clear. The Evo SL is a trainer, the Adios 9 is a race flat. One is a race shoe, one's a trainer. However, when you run in these, you realize that the Evo SL is completely capable of doing everything that the Adios 9 can, though the Adios 9 is really focused more on the higher end of speed. Therefore, I do think these two shoes actually work well together, and I actually think you pair these shoes together, because where the Evo SL falls down a little bit, for me it's really fast running, that's where the Adios 9 really picks up. And where the Adios 9 picks up with, having a lot of ground feel and feeling the ground, the Evo SL sort of mutes that out when you just want to be able to kind of set and forget and cruise in a shoe. So I think these two shoes work extremely well together. Moving to the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, from a dimension standpoint, they're actually a lot closer than I thought, at least in the forefoot. I'm not surprised the heel and the midfoot is so much narrower in the Adios 9. The Adios 9 just feels super nimble underfoot. The Evo SL also feels nimble, but that's coming from the springiness of the foam and the rocker, whereas in the Adios 9, that's coming just from the ground feel, how close you are to the ground, and the feel that you get with the light traction or CPU outsole that feels very slipper-like. You really feel the ground and the energy transfer and how your foot is interfacing with the ground in the Adios 9. You get flex. You do feel the ground a little bit in the Evo SL, but nothing like the Adios 9. And that's really where I think these two shoes work so well together. This shoe is your go-to for any kind of longer tempo running on the road, where this is your go-to shoe for any kind of true speed work or track workouts or hill running. This is an excellent hill shoe because of the flexibility in this shoe. And I just think if you like more natural flexing shoes that you can actually feel your foot work in and you can actually feel the ground under you. Obviously, there's more ground feel in this shoe than there is in this shoe. And you've never really liked training in plated shoes, I think you owe it to yourself to actually get both of these because, as I said, they complement each other really well. What this shoe doesn't do well, this shoe does, and vice versa. They just work so perfectly together. And lastly, the Evo SL versus the Evo 1, the namesake of the Evo SL and where it comes from. From a design language and overall engineering and form factor of the shoe, the Evo SL is the Evo 1. There's some minor changes, but fundamentally they are the same shoe. Now, I don't own a pair of Evo 1s, but I have run in it twice now, both in the store, once just up and down the aisles. The second time was about 500 or 600 meters on a treadmill. I guess that's the beauty of being a sample size. Now, the Evo 1 had a feel that I did not expect. It has a barely there feel on foot, but it's very rolling. There's compression to the foam, but there's no sink. It's more of a absorbing the impact. But the shoe just rolls you forward as it becomes part of your foot. It just disappears because of the weight. The rods in that shoe also help propel that shoe forward, stiffen out the entire platform, but it's a very absorbent and very rolling forward feel. Now, the Evo SL carries both of those forward. It has that very absorbing underfoot, even though it is a different foam. The Evo SL's in the Lightstrike Pro Classic foam, which is very springy, whereas in the Evo 1 you have Lightstrike Pro Evo foam, which is very absorbent. But the Evo 1 absorbs that initial impact, rolls you forward. It does become part of your foot, even though it's considerably heavier, but it still really becomes part of your foot because of the balance of the shoe. But the difference is that you get the spring of Lightstrike Pro Classic in the Evo SL. And I think the Evo SL ride actually is the ride that a lot of people expected the Evo 1 to have, but that's actually the Evo SL. And that's actually quite exciting. And looking at the outsole and contact patch of these two shoes, they are nearly identical. And yes, I did bring a ruler and measure the Evo 1 in store. The salesperson was very surprised as to what I was doing, and I got the same dimensions. They are fundamentally the same shoe. There's some minor tweaks in the toe area and in the heel area, but fundamentally these are identical shoes. However, the Evo 1 gets a big, beautiful piece of continental rubber in the forefoot. It doesn't have that liquid rubber piece that's on the Evo 1, which is cool and technically interesting. But even on the treadmill, I could feel how kind of iffy it could be on some surfaces, and it was really squeaky actually. But the outsole continental rubber on the Evo SL is a huge, massive upgrade. And what I've been told is it's much closer to what the pros are actually racing in their Evo 1 in the Evo 1 V2. It's not the same compound, but it's much closer in how it feels to the pro version of the Evo 1. I don't have an Evo 1. I didn't buy it. I can't justify the cost for a shoe that I'm not really going to use, so I'll play some B-roll while I talk about the differences between the two shoes. The barely there-ness of the Evo 1, that ultra lightweight upper and really all the materials of the shoe definitely feel different on foot. But when you're standing in the Evo 1 and the Evo SL, they have a similar rocker feel and forward roll even when you're standing in them. So the rocker definitely carries over. And just the way the shoe molds to your foot and kind of feels in your foot, you get that when you first put your foot in the Evo 1, because it is so soft and it absorbs everything, your foot just kind of molds to the top of it. Whereas once the Evo SL breaks in, it molds to the bottom of your foot, and that's how that shoe disappears, even though there is more weight in the SL. It's really remarkable how Adidas managed to carry over the best of the Evo 1, but in a much more durable shoe that really anyone can benefit from in the Evo SL. The Evo SL is the Evo that most people need. If you're an elite runner, which you're probably not watching this video, yeah, that's where the Evo 1 and now the new Evo 2 makes sense for you. But for every other runner, you're going to be far better off in the Evo SL, and that's the Evo that you want. And as promised, let's look at the mother of all performance matrices. Now there's 8 shoes on here, and if we put all of them on here and we start with the Evo SL, as you can see, the range of the Evo SL really ticks all of the boxes in here. Though, again, the sweet spot for this shoe is really in threshold. It wants to be at threshold and it just wants to keep ticking over and over and over and over, which makes it an excellent training shoe and I think an even better race shoe for many, many runners. Now, if we put all of the other ones on here, some of these you've seen before, some of them I have never done actually, but you can see the Evo SL compared to the Adios Pro 3, the range is much bigger. I think the Adios Pro 3 never really had the top end for me. It was actually very similar, as you can see, to the Boston 12. Just didn't have that max effort. A lot of that was the rocker, a lot of that was the foam in the Boston 12. But the sweet spot of all three of those shoes is actually very similar. The Takumi Sen definitely is more top end. But as I said a lot in 2024, it actually does threshold into steady very nicely, though it's happiest going fastest. The SL2 is the so-called boring neutral daily trainer in the range, and that makes sense why it does so well with easy into steady. Anytime I went into threshold and really started to push pace, get into marathon pace or a little bit faster, that's where that shoe always fell down for me. But that's exactly where the Evo SL picks up. And again, that's why I think the two shoes work so well together. And now looking at the Adios Pro 4, again, I think the sweet spot of that shoe is in threshold. Again, it's a marathon racing shoe. It makes sense that it's in threshold, which is where marathon pace should be in that range. But it does have a higher end. It does have the top end and max effort, unlike the Adios Pro 3 to me, because of the geometry, because of the foam, because of the resilience. It's all there. The shoe is much faster for a much broader range of running, though I do think I prefer the Evo SL feel for that faster running. The Adios 9 is a shoe that just wants to go fast, though it does threshold okay. It gets into steady okay. It's also got a secondary range in easy, which I've talked about in a lot of my Adios 9 content. I like that shoe for easy running, but I also like it for speed work. It's really just the shoe that kind of sits on the two ends of the Evo SL and really complements everything else in the middle of the range for the Evo SL. And then the Evo 1, that's a shoe that really comes alive at threshold, and the faster you push, the more you put energy into the ground, the better that shoe does. It's really quite a magical shoe, and it deserves all of the kind of kudos and awards that that shoe got. It really is an incredible feeling, but as I said, you're getting almost all of it, if not better for most runners, in the Evo SL. This video is being recorded in the middle of January 2025, which means we have a full year of 2025 for Adizero releases to come out. And there's still some big ones to come out in 2025. The first one is the Boston 13. Now, we've seen this shoe from pretty much every angle, and it looks like there's still a dual foam setup in it. But the big question with this shoe is, what are the two foams? The assumption here is that it's new Lightstrike Pro, but if there is a secondary foam in that shoe, what is that secondary foam? That will determine how well that shoe actually works and how it will compare to the Evo SL. I'll be covering that shoe, and I will definitely be doing the versus videos to the Evo SL and the Boston 13 when it's out. Next shoe is the Takumi Sen 11. Now, we've seen this shoe in all of the leaks, and it looks just like the Adios 9 with a little bit more stack height, but it will have the energy rods in it. Now, the question with this shoe is what foam is in that shoe? The assumption, again, is that it's new Lightstrike Pro. But given how compressive the new Lightstrike Pro is, I feel like the Adios Pro, with that full like over 30 millimeter stack in the forefoot, is really pushing the boundaries of compression and feeling the dimensionality of the energy rods, because the rods are thicker than a carbon fiber plate. And I feel like the Adios Pro 4 is really pushing the boundaries of feeling the rods underfoot. So it's going to be really interesting how the Takumi Sen 11 handles that. Now, I will be covering the Takumi Sen 11. I'll be doing all the versus videos and probably against the Evo SL and a bunch of other shoes. Next one on the list is the Prime X 3 Strung. Now, the Prime X is a shoe that wasn't in this video because traditionally it's not a shoe I'm interested in running in. I don't really kind of take that shoe seriously. But the Prime X 3 Strung looks ridiculous this year, and it looks like it's building on the Prime X2 Strung and going even further with that essentially dual carbon plate engineering that was in that shoe. So much so that I'm actually interested in running in it. So I probably will be covering the Prime X3 Strung this year and doing the versus videos with the Evo SL and whatever else I think it compares to. Now, two other shoes are the SL3, and then there's this kind of unnamed trainer that's been sort of referenced by some people that I know that know these things. Now, I am unclear whether these are separate shoes or there's a shoe coming to replace the SL2. I'm not clear if it's an SL3 or it's this new unnamed trainer, but there is some sort of new trainer that's meant to be a true daily trainer in the Adizero range coming out in 2025, and I've heard it's extremely exciting. In fact, one of my contacts who is involved in Adizero and Adidas with a lot of runners has been raving about it. Won't tell me anything about it, just saying wait until you see it. So there's some exciting surprises coming from Adizero in 2025, and I will definitely be covering them as soon as they come out. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.